Every generation faces tyranny. Every generation faces corruption and is forced to stand up against it or become enslaved. Our ancestors fought and died so that we'd have the little bit of liberty we have now. It is a sacred treasure. And from liberty comes all prosperity. The human race is depending on all of you out there that are seeing this information to educate yourself on the facts presented in this film and then to take action.
We've got to forget about Washington, D.C. I think Washington, D.C. is too far gone. It's a cesspool of iniquity. I think it's totally and thoroughly corrupt. It doesn't matter which party you put in charge of the White House or Congress, nothing of substance changes. I really think the power and strength of the people rests where it always has rested, and that is with the states.
So we need to start putting some teeth into our state laws, and we need to be electing sheriffs that are going to protect us from federal agents when they initially don't understand this because their civics lessons weren't very good in school.
The 10th Amendment very clearly says any authority not granted to the federal government by the Constitution belongs to we the people and the sovereign states that make up this union.
The states had all the power. They gave some few powers that are listed in the Constitution to the federal government and kept all the rest for themselves.
Well, my first guest works for the people of Oklahoma, and he's trying to do right by them. But he believes it's kind of hard to do that when the federal government keeps butting into the state's business. And now he's working to pass a bill in the state of Oklahoma that would declare state sovereignty from the federal government.
Well, the resolution is saying that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land and that it specifically delegates certain powers to the federal government, and all other powers are reserved to the people and the states, and that the federal government has increasingly moved out of that framework over the last several decades, and that they need to get back into that proper role.
A number of states already have them. Many more are considering similar resolutions as a bulwark, proponents say, against the federal government handing down laws that they see as unfunded or unconstitutional.
Ongoing pattern of overstepping its constitutional authority.
Dozens of states are now considering resolutions asserting their sovereignty under the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, pushing back against Washington's intrusion into everything from land use to gun control.
And there's really somewhat of an uprising in the states across the country is this federal law called the Real ID Act.
Texas appears ready to declare its sovereignty again. Bill HCR 50 is currently in Texas's House. It reasserts the constitutional guarantee of the 10th Amendment.
We need to focus on our state government. We need to focus on our state legislators, the governor's mansion, the state Supreme Court, the sheriffs at the state and local level. All these agencies need to be the focus of freedom-loving people.
And if you do treasure the notion that your rights are unalienable, meaning imbued in you by our Creator, and you want to defend the American circumstance, the only way we can effectively battle the Agenda 21 protocol is to do it locally.
We have the checks and balances in the states to be able to maintain the freedom of our people.
You get involved in your local area. I mean, that's where you can affect the most change.
I don't know why we have FEMA. I don't see anything about a FEMA in our Constitution. I think it should be eliminated.
We're fighting tyranny. We're standing up for liberty. We're the good guys. We have the moral high ground on our side.
All you have to do is get started. Take that first step, and then you'll find that you get this momentum, and you can't stop it.
We are the government.
Do whatever you can to get involved and get to know what is happening in your state. Are they watching people in your state and sending information up to FBI and Homeland Security? Are you going to be profiled in a report issued by your state?
They have answered the stirrings of liberty with brute force, killings, mass arrests, and the setting up of concentration camps. Ronald Reagan.
You are watching our special storm alert coverage of Hurricane Katrina.
This morning I spoke about the Hurricane Katrina.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons. No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Police department! Police department, anyone home? all of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. And they said, let us in. I said, it's not even loaded. And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun, lock.
Well, they punched me in the face. Lock now. Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me.
At the direct orders of New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin, the New Orleans Police Department, the National Guard, DEA, ATF, and U.S. Marshals began breaking into people's homes at gunpoint, confiscating lawfully owned firearms, and in many cases, evicting the residents from their own homes. Most Americans believe that of all their civil rights, the one that they would never have to fear losing would be their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. However, in the wake of a declared state of emergency, when gun confiscation can legally take place, how do you draw the distinction between disarming law-abiding citizens and the true criminals at large? And an even better question is, how do you justify removing someone's only line of defense in a time of true crisis where ownership of a firearm may become your only way of defending you, your family, and your property from death and destruction? Over 10,000 people chose to remain in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina struck. Their choice to stay was due primarily to the fact that large sections of the city were never completely flooded or never flooded at all. Not to mention that many of these people were born in Louisiana. These were their family homes. People with food, water, and the ability to sustain themselves chose to remain in their homes until the crisis had subsided. But for those people, the real crisis would come from their own government. And if you think that these violations of civil liberties in the United States were illegal, think again. Executive Order 10990 allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control the highways and seaports. 10995 allows the government to seize and control the communications media. 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. 10998 allows the government to seize all means of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, or vehicles of any kind. 10999 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11,000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. 11,001 allows the government to take over all health, education, and welfare functions. 11,002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. 11,003 allows the government to take over all airports and aircraft, including commercial aircraft. 11,004 allows the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, build new housing with public funds, and designate areas to be abandoned. 11,005 allows the government to take over railroads, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. 11,921 gives the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency the authority to take over all banking institutions in the United States. As we've just seen, there are laws on the books that make it perfectly legal for the United States government to suspend citizens' rights. However, if we look to the founding documents for guidance, we'll find that it's not our government that bestows these rights upon us in the first place. According to the founders, all of our rights are unalienable. So what does that mean? According to Webster's dictionary, the definition of unalienable is not capable of being transferred to another, or in layman's terms, non-negotiable, not to be forfeited, or birthright. How much plainer can it possibly be? Our founding documents tell us that these rights cannot be transferred or taken away by anyone, not by any person, not by any government. So if the government passes laws that violate the Constitution, how can they enforce those bad laws? It's very simple. We let them do it. And speaking to the topic of suppressing public disorder, clergy response teams were employed in the aftermath of the New Orleans disaster. The first directive that these pastors were mandated to preach to their congregations was a passage from Christian scriptures, Romans 13. This is the same passage that German pastors preached to their congregations to subdue potential uprisings at the beginning of World War II. Romans 13 states, everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. There can be no doubt that the founders of this country were overwhelmingly influenced by the teachings found in Scripture, and as a result, those philosophies profoundly influenced our founding documents and laws. Okay, I'll go with that. The United States was founded in the name of God. But please keep in mind that that was over 200 years ago. The shape of the U.S. political system has been manipulated to serve corporate needs and corporate interest over the will of the people. I seriously doubt that a man who calls the U.S. Constitution a goddamn piece of paper has our best interest in mind. Perhaps the question we should be asking before we voluntarily submit to any government is, which God does this government serve?